Welcome to the deep dive. Ever wonder, what it would really take for the big digital assets, I mean, beyond just Bitcoin and Ethereum, to properly land in mainstream investment portfolios? Felt like a long shot for ages, right? But what if I told you a huge shift might be happening, like right now? Could
Yeah.
totally redefine your investment options. Today, we are diving deep into this fast-moving world of digital asset investments. We're focusing on the potential imminent approval of new diversified digital asset ETFs right here in the US, our mission pull out the key insights from our source material. It's a great piece, updated July 1st, 2025, by Wayne Jones, called Experts Positive on Crypto Altcoin ETFs This Year. Will XRP, ADA, and SOL benefit? Really lays out what's going on. And joining me, as always, our expert guide to help connect the dots and give us that wider perspective.
Yeah, it really feels like a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
And the sources, well, they give some very compelling reasons why the whole digital asset landscape might be on the verge of something big. We're seeing these significant regulatory shifts happening, expert predictions gaining confidence, and market demand is just, well, surging. There's quite a lot to unpack, honestly. Lots of detail. But our goal is to simplify it, right? Focus on what really matters for you, the listener, as you try to understand this evolving investment frontier.
Okay, so let's jump right in then, because there's this really significant decision looming, like immediately. It could set a stage for everything else. Wayne Jones's article points straight at the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. They're expected to rule on the Grayscale Digital Large Cap Fund GDLC this very week. Why is this one fund so important right now? What makes it such a focal point?
Well, the GDLC is fascinating because of its potential significance. If it gets the green light, it would actually be the SEC's first approval for a U.S. product holding a basket of specific alternative digital assets within an ETF. Just think about that. Until now, the ETF focus has pretty much been Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum more recently. So this isn't just another fund approval. It potentially opens up a whole new area, gives a kind of legitimacy to a wider class of digital assets for mainstream investors. It's like the first crack in the dam, potentially. Could really unleash institutional money that's been waiting on the sidelines.
And the experts seem pretty confident, don't they? Nate Gerasi, president of the ETF store, he's predicting a high likelihood of approval for GDLC. That sounds like a really strong statement, especially, given the SEC's usual caution with crypto. What's his reasoning? Why so confident?
Gerasi makes a really compelling case, actually. It boils down to a few key things. First, he points to the SEC really engaging seriously. Grayscale filed an amended S3 form just last Thursday, June 26th. That's not just ticking a box. It suggests they're actively considering it deeply. You probably wouldn't go through that if a flat rejection was expected. It looks more like the SEC is working with Grayscale here. Second, and this is maybe even more interesting, Gerasi talks about what he calls a regulatory loophole. Basically, the existing rules allow up to 15% of an ETF's holdings to be in private assets. And he notes some issuers are getting, let's say, creative with this. Now, that raises a question, right? Is the SEC being flexible here, or is this just a smart workaround they're kind of tolerating as they step carefully into this space? Suggests maybe a pragmatic approach, not just a hard no.
So how do the big altcoins like XRP, Solana, Cardano fit into that? Are they inside that 15% limit that makes GDLC viable?
Exactly, that's the key point. In the GVLC portfolio, XRP, Solana, and Cardano together, they make up less than 10% of the holdings. Drossi's argument is that excluding them, especially given that small percentage, wouldn't really align with the 1933 Securities Act. It would be, well, kind of illogical from a regulatory standpoint. If an ETF holds a diverse basket and these components are under a threshold, blocking it gets harder to justify legally. So he sees GDLC as a sort of low-risk test run for the SEC, a way for them to test the waters with broader altcoins without approving individual spot ETFs right away. He specifically says, and this is key from the source, think high likelihood this is approved, would then be followed later by approval for individual spot ETFs on XRP, SOL, ADA, etc. So it frames this GDLC decision not as the final word, but maybe the start of something much bigger.
Right. That's where it gets really interesting, doesn't it? This potential GDLC approval, it's not happening in isolation. Seems like part of a much wider, maybe even surprising, warming trend in the U.S. towards digital assets. For ages, the U.S. felt like a tough place for crypto innovation. What's really behind this change?
Absolutely. It's connected to a bigger picture. Wayne Jones's article highlights a string of pro-digital asset moves in the U.S. that have been building steam. And, this shift seems to have been encouraged or maybe emboldened by President Donald Trump's embrace of the industry. That seems to have given asset managers more confidence to push forward with filings they might have held back on before. It's not just talk. It feels like a real shift in mood in finance and regulation. Maybe a more open environment for innovation here.
And we've definitely seen the activity pick up, haven't we? The source mentions a flurry of altcoin ETF filings since early 2025.
Hmm.
It's not just Grayscale now. We're talking standalone applications for XRP, Solana, Cardano from huge names like WisdomTrue, 21 Shares, VanEck. These are massive players in traditional finance, stepping into what used to be seen as, well, pretty niche or risky.
That's right. And it's not only new filings. Grayscale itself, the firm behind GDLC, they've also put in separate proposals to convert their existing XRP and Solana trusts into actual spot ETFs.
Right.
Now, that's something that, honestly, until very recently, most people would have said was dead on arrival.
Hmm.
I remember just maybe a year ago, the idea the SEC would even formally acknowledge a filing like that seemed like pure fantasy. But the fact that the SEC did acknowledge Grayscale's Solana ETF proposal back in February, that was a big signal. Bloomberg analyst Eric Belchunas called it a baby step, but a notable development. Really highlights how much the regulatory climate has shifted and how fast. It says a lot about this new willingness from regulators to actually engage.
And just to underline how broad this embrace is becoming, the source even mentioned that Trump Media, a business connected to the president, has also filed for a spot Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF. They're using crypto.com as the custodian. It really feels like everyone wants in now, from the TradFi giants to, politically linked groups. The whole space seems to be rapidly gaining legitimacy.
And that push isn't just hype, It's being driven, fundamentally, by surging institutional demand. This isn't just retail speculation anymore. We're talking large institutions, pension funds, hedge funds, family offices. They're actively asking for these kinds of products. They need regulated, easy ways to get exposure to digital assets without dealing with direct custody or navigating unregulated exchanges.
You can definitely see that demand in the numbers. The source laid it out pretty clearly. Spot Bitcoin ETFs. They pulled in over $2.2 billion in inflows just last week. That makes it 7 weeks straight of net inflows. The total amount in them is now almost $50 billion. That's data from Soso Value. This isn't just a momentary blip. It's a huge ongoing movement of capital from big players, really changing the market dynamics.
Yeah, it's a very clear signal. Digital assets are moving from the sidelines towards the center stage of traditional finance.
Okay, so with all these massive changes happening, this potential new ways to invest opening up, what does this actually mean for you if you're looking to get involved or just understand these markets better? The landscape's obviously shifting and opportunities are definitely popping up.
Yeah, and our sources do touch on some practical ways you might get involved or at least stay informed as these potential new investment routes open up. This kind of increased access could really change how a lot of people approach digital asset investing, offering easier regulated paths than we had just a couple of years back. Understanding these options is pretty key right now.
That's right. So for those of you curious about these new opportunities or maybe thinking about exploring the market because of these developments, our source material did mention some interesting pathways. If you're not already set up on a digital asset exchange, well, this might be a moment to think about it. You'll find links to register for platforms like these and also to join relevant community channels. I think a Telegram channel was mentioned right in the description below this deep dive. Feel free to pause now and check those out if it sounds interesting and fits with what you're looking for. All right, let's quickly recap what we've covered in this deep dive. We're basically on the edge of a potentially historic SEC decision on the Grayscale Digital Large Cap Fund, the GDLC ETF. And this isn't just about one fund. It could be a really important first step, a stepping stone towards the U.S. approving individual spot ETFs for other major digital assets, XRP, Solana, Cardano, maybe others.
Right.
And all this is happening against a backdrop of, a significant regulatory shift, a thawing, you could say, an absolutely booming institutional demand for these products.
Yeah, what it really means for the bigger picture, for the whole digital asset world, is a serious acceleration of institutional adoption and, honestly, legitimacy. We're seeing this rapid move from what was often seen as a niche kind of speculative market to something increasingly woven into traditional finance. And the speed this is happening at, it's quite remarkable. It makes you think about how quickly entire asset classes can change when regulations and market sentiment shift. It really shows how adaptable both technology and financial systems can be.
Indeed. So here's a final thought to chew on. If these diversified digital asset ETFs do become common, just another option in the investment toolkit, what does that really mean for how traditional investors might start seeing digital assets in their portfolios? And maybe looking even broader, Could this whole test run idea regulators using a mixed fund to explore a new asset class cautiously? Could that change how they approach other new or, let's say, unconventional investment types down the road? Something to think about as you continue exploring. If you found this deep dive valuable, please do subscribe to stay informed. Give us a like, that really helps support us, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of our future deep dives. Thanks for joining us.